Hello, this is Rhonda Smith, the host of the Recover, Restore, Re-Energize Your Life show. Today's guest is Juliette Aiyana, who is a licensed acupuncturist and Chinese herbalist. Good morning, Juliette. How are you?
Good morning, Rhonda. I'm very well. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for being part of the show today. So you're a Chinese herbalist and you studied Chinese medicine. Can you tell us what Chinese medicine is really all about?
Oh, sure. And it is a really long story, so I'm going to try to encapsulate it. So Chinese medicine has a written history that dates back 2,000 years. So it was likely practiced much longer than that because the writing that we have is absolutely incredible. And it reflects a very dynamic methodology that had been created for quite a long time by traditional practitioners. And Chinese medicine aims at the treatment of the symptoms of disease and the underlying causes of diseases. Because if we just treat the symptoms, then they'll just keep coming back, right? So Chinese medicine recognizes this, and we really want to get to the root cause. So we call the root, obviously it's the root, and the symptoms are the branch. So we'll often engage in our treatment protocol will be to treat the root and the branch.
So how does Chinese medicine then differ, say, from naturopathic medicine?
Well, for us, we're really looking at a very whole picture. And I think I was just speaking to a naturopath recently who was also a medical doctor, and then she went ahead and studied naturopathic medicine. And she said that she wished that she studied Chinese medicine because she still feels like she's treating symptoms, and not all naturopaths treat that way. But it's a little bit different because it's still somewhat mechanized. With traditional Chinese medicine, instead of trying to fit people into a more rigid treatment model, we tailor the treatment to the patient, right? So we're treating patients, not diseases. And so it's kind of like when you go to a tailor and you have a suit or a dress made specifically for you and your body. That's what Chinese medicine does. We tailor the treatment specific to each individual. And this is why I think Chinese medicine works so well, as the patient's energy and symptoms shift and change and resolve, our treatment strategy shifts and changes. So it's a very dynamic methodology of treatment.
Okay. So would you say then it has more of a, I don't know, genetic or metabolic sort of basis as compared to naturopathic medicine?
Well, we do look at constitution, which one might consider genetics, and that does inform how we might work with someone, and it certainly will inform which herbs we choose. Some people may be more responsive to particular herbs. Someone with a more robust constitution might be able to handle a more robust herb or combination of herbs, and someone who's very weak, their constitution is frail, we have to be a little bit more gentle in terms of our treatment strategy.
Right. Now, I understand what you mean by constitution. It's kind of like someone's dosha. But for for the people in the audience who may not really understand what that is, can you explain that for them?
Sure. Well, we break it down in a few different ways. The most basic would be yin or yang constitution. And then we can also break it into the 5 elements, and that could be a very long conversation. So I'll just focus on yin and yang. So yang energy is energy that moves. It's upward, outward, expansive. We might think about the sun shining. We also may think of it as being a more robust, external, outgoing type of energy. And with yin energy, it's more internal, quiet, peaceful, contractive, downward moving, or things like this. So we'll look at the type of, or what we call the pattern of energetic disharmony, And we can also sort of flesh out what constitution the person is, oftentimes by looking at them, speaking to them, listening to their voice. Are they like a loud Italian Jersey girl like I am? I have some yang excess that goes on. Or are they very quiet, and do they have to take a lot of breaths? Is there even folding in of the shoulders and this kind of sitting, as opposed to someone who might sit and talk to you like this? Some people will sort of tend to lie back and be really quiet, maybe not as much eye contact, things of that nature. We're looking and listening all the time that we're talking to our patients.
So what you're really doing is kind of assessing someone's energy, because what you're talking about is what they project to you when you actually see them in person, when you're evaluating them as a patient. And I would assume you're able to do that via video conference or Skype if you're doing something remote with a patient. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I work with people remotely all the time. Sometimes as patients who I've seen in my office and they've gone on and moved, and if I've gotten to know them really well, I can sometimes just email with them if I know them very well. Sometimes we do have to get back on camera. And then I can also examine the tongue if we have good enough light, if the light is strong enough. The tongue gives practitioners of Chinese medicine a lot of information, as well as everything that's sort of external on the body.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because I really got involved with integrative medicine and alternative practices when I was a cancer patient, because I worked with an integrative nutritionist who was actually how you and I met. And one of the things that she did every single time I went to visit her was actually look at my tongue, and I was really amazed that she could tell a lot about what was happening with me by looking at my tongue and what patterns she saw on my tongue, the color of my tongue. And so can you talk a little bit about that and maybe give an example of what you have noticed or been able to tell from a patient just by looking at their tongue?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I can often, so the tongue, so we're going to look at the color of the tongue body, and oftentimes the color is not even. We may find that in the rear it's darker, or there may be little bumps that are darkened. The edges may be different in color. The tip could potentially be red. If I see a red tip in pregnant women, a healthy pregnant woman. I see a red tip in patients who are having insomnia, sleep disorders, which would be an unhealthy red tip. Sometimes the tongue body is very pale and deficient. It's vacuous of blood, perhaps. Or it could mean maybe there's not blood vacuity or emptiness of blood, but perhaps the blood isn't able to reach the top part of of the patient's body, and it's about a stagnation issue. And then there would be other indications on the tongue, and when I examine the patient and speak to them, that there may be some stagnation. And if we can let that, when I can aid the patient with herbs or acupuncture, and they can do things at home like stretching and relaxation techniques and things like this, we can get the energy to move and move the blood flow, and perhaps in a few weeks I'll see a change in tongue color.
Okay. So then, oh, go ahead, I'm sorry. So you make recommendations then for the type of herbs that you use to treat a patient based on what you see in their tongue pattern? Is that part of it?
It is part of it, yeah. So the tongue, if it's someone whom I'm seeing in person, I'll take their pulse, and that is really incredible work. Pulse diagnosis is wonderful stuff. We take pulse on both wrists, and each position, I use 3 fingers. Each position will give me information about pairs of organ systems, and that's extraordinarily helpful to me. The only time where it may not be helpful is if the patient is on an abundance of pharmaceutical medication. It can change the pulse and feeling, and the same thing for the tongue. So I have to sometimes throw information away and figure out what should I keep, what should I throw away. Sometimes it's all of it. And yeah, so and listening to the patient, and I ask lots of questions. So my patients might say, hey, you know, I'm coming in, I have migraines. And I don't just ask about the migraines. I ask about the migraines. I ask about neck and shoulder pain. I ask about digestion. If it's a woman, I'll ask about her menstrual periods. Stress, work-related stress. Are they parents? Are they getting enough sleep? How much water are they drinking? And of course, diet. I do a huge thing with diet, much like your practitioner did with you. So we look at all of these things.
Okay, and so you brought up the subject of pharmaceuticals, and I'm really curious about the use of pharmaceuticals in treating disease and using herbs from your perspective in terms of their effectiveness and overall, I guess, being able to generate a recovery and well-being for the patient. So do you have a perspective on that? Oh, I'm sure you do. But
I certainly do. I think that there are a small number of medications that are a blessing for us to have. And the rest of them are pretty much garbage. I think that medications are often handed out like candy. Look, you know what? Our MDs are trained in a particular way. I am an herbalist. I'm trained in another way. I have a very different perspective. So I think when we're talking about medical doctors, it's important to understand what their training is, and that a handful of them will leave their training, start practicing, and realize that they're not really getting to the core of the issue with their patients, and they begin self-study. They'll begin studying courses for integrative medicine or functional medicine or naturopathy, and some people come and they will do a whole master's degree course in traditional Chinese medicine. There are a handful of doctors who are doing that now because they want to expand their practice. They want to really be able to help people rather than placing Band-Aids on them and seeing them over and over for the same thing, or once you do take one medication, you have to take another one to mitigate the side effects of this, and the next thing you know, someone's on 5 or 6 medications. And if they have numerous problems going on, Dr. A might give these medicines, Dr. B may give these medicines, Dr. C gives these medicines, and sometimes oftentimes the doctors don't communicate unless they're working under one roof or within a hospital setting. And sometimes patients don't tell the doctors the whole story. That can often happen. Oftentimes my patients won't tell their doctors when they're taking herbs. That has actually changed over the past 14 years. More and more of my patients reveal to their doctors that they're taking Chinese herbs or other herbs, even if they're not Chinese, if they're other types of herbs. And that's wonderful. And that shows me that there's 2 shifts have happened. One is that patients are feeling more empowered to take care of themselves, and the fear of the white coat is beginning to dissipate slowly but surely. Patients feel like, you know what, I'm going to go and I'm going to tell my doctor what's working for me. I want them to know that this is what I'm doing so that they can work with me on that level. They know where I'm at. But also, they want their doctors to know so that maybe their doctors will become more open. And secondarily, maybe this isn't really secondarily, but number 2 is doctors are becoming much more open. Even the Cleveland Clinic in Ohio has hired a Chinese herbalist. This is huge news. And it makes me just extraordinarily happy. So we're really coming into a time where there is true integrative medicine in a lot of centers. And a lot of medical doctors are doing this now. And hopefully what will happen is there will be a need for less and less pharmaceutical medicating of patients. The other thing that, do you mind?
No. That will be a very interesting shift. I spend a lot of time working with pharmaceutical companies, so that'll be a very interesting shift to see.
Well, there's pushback from the pharmaceutical, of course, you know, and what they're trying to do is actually buy up certain crops so that they can patent them and sell them, and it is very worrisome for herbalists, but it is happening. Nestle is one of them. So I won't go on my Nestle tangent. Suffice to say, please boycott Nestle. And do your homework, you'll find it all. And that's not the only reason. You know, there is, I just wanted to go back. I lost my thought. Hopefully you can edit this part. Oh.
Well, let me ask you, okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
And now, no, it's gone again. Go ahead, you go.
Okay, the question for you is, I'm very curious about if you can provide an example where you had a patient who may have been on medications or multiple medications where you were able to actually get them off their medication and maybe to some extent reverse their condition through herbal treatment and Chinese medicine practice.
Yeah, so one of the main medications that I can get women off of is the pill. The birth control pill is most often used for off-label reasons, right? So the birth control pill is supposed to be used for birth control. However, when women go into their doctors are telling them, oh, you have endometriosis pain, you have PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, you have fibroids, you have PMS, you have dysmenorrhea, you have amenorrhea, you have moodiness, you're a human being, oh gosh, forget it, you're moody, let's put you on the pill, let's hormone you. These are a lot of reasons that women are being placed on the pill, and often women are told by their doctors that the pill will regulate their periods. However, that's not what the pill does. The pill suppresses the menstrual period, it suppresses ovulation, and it suppresses the period altogether. So the woman's body thinks that it's pregnant, essentially, the entire time that it's on. And what happens when the woman gets to the placebo pill is there's actually just a shedding of the lining because there's a hormone drop, and then the lining sheds. So it is not a true period. So I have a lot of women who come to me with a variety of female pelvic disorders that are being treated, or maybe even I'd say psychospiritual or other hormonal imbalances that are being treated with the pill. And it's usually quite easy for me to get them off the pill and correct what the imbalance was. So for example, I see a lot of patients for uterine fibroids, right? And many of these women have very heavy bleeding. They have intermenstrual bleeding, and it can be very uncomfortable and exhausting. So with Chinese herbs, I can help to regulate that. Depending on the size of the fibroid, I can shrink it or get rid of it, but that all depends on size. For women who have, just in general, heavy, painful menses that they've been using the pill for can be corrected. And what's very interesting about that particular disorder, if it's not, often if it isn't based in severe endometriosis, if it's just sort of run-of-the-mill heavy menses and pain, sometimes all I have to do is work with a patient for 6 months to a year with herbs, and then they can come off of the herbs and they won't need them anymore. Or if they feel like they're having a little rough time, they could take it for a short period of time, and then they'll be back in action again. I see a lot of women who miss their menstrual cycles. Sometimes it's related to polycystic ovarian syndrome, and sometimes it isn't. And so I can work with them to restore their menstrual periods. If it's a woman with PCOS, that restoration might mean, so women with PCOS.
What can you tell us what PCOS is? What is that?
It's a metabolic disorder, and it is a chronic disease. And so the disease in and of itself, I don't necessarily cure, but the manifestation of missing menstrual periods, of anovulation, can be corrected with traditional Chinese medicine. So what I can help is, let's say I have a woman who hasn't had her period for a year or two, I can get her to have a regular menstrual period. For some of those women, it is a regular 28 to 30-day cycle. For some of them, it's a 40 to 45-day, and then for some others, it might be like a 3 or 4 time a year period. Just depends on who it is. But we can restore it. And so for some women who just don't want to be on the pill, they don't want to take metformin, which is a blood they also use it. This is an off-label use of metformin. It's a blood glucose regulating medication, which is being handed out like candy now. I'd say much more often in the past 4 or 5 years than it ever had before for my PCOS patients. And many of them don't tolerate that medication very well at all. So these are some things that we can restore with regard to polycystic ovarian syndrome.
So one of the lessons here is what you referred to the term off-label a few times, and an example with birth control pills and metformin. And so I think I've seen it a lot too. I've spent a lot of time working with pharmaceutical companies, and off-label means when a doctor prescribes a medication for you that's for something other than what it was originally developed for. Right. And so I think it's important from a patient empowerment standpoint when you talked about people being well informed and helping to be prepared to participate in their decision making for their care. It's important to really understand what drugs are intended to be used for and what particular ailment or disease they were actually developed for, as opposed to being sort of a one problem or one solution solves all problems sort of thing, like Prozac was back in the day.
Right.
It was for an antidepressant, but people were using it, or doctors were prescribing it for sex drive, mood swings, whatever they could,
problems, right? Yeah.
Right, anything. So I think that's an important thing, because we don't want to encourage the misuse of drugs that could potentially lead to other problems. So I think, to your point, being aware of and understanding what your situation is, first of all, and being able to be well informed and fully armed with information when you do go in to see a doctor, when you're presenting whatever symptoms you're dealing with to him or her. So,
and I'd like to propose that your audience do the same with their herbalists.
Okay.
So it is very rare that with herbs and vitamin supplements or other, natural supplements, it's very rare that there is a one-size-fits-all treatment in terms of herbs as well. There are a few things that do have a very broad spectrum, like fish oils, for example. Sometimes vitamin D3 can, and maybe like astragalus root, which is also huang qi in Chinese medicine, can sometimes be used on its own for general energy, for example. But most of the time, if something's being marketed as a cure-all, I'd say just be really careful. Really look into it, and maybe consult an herbalist to figure out whether it's the best thing for you.
That's good. Go ahead.
Yeah. Just because it's natural doesn't necessarily mean that it's safe or effective for you and for what you're going through and dealing with.
So I guess one of the things is to make sure, if you are dealing with a Chinese herbalist or someone who practices Chinese medicine, is to see their credentials. That's an important thing, correct?
Absolutely, yes. So, and in the United States, it's really quite easy to figure that out. So we have all graduated from a master's degree program, and some people have the diploma hanging up in their office. Some don't, especially if they're renting out of someone else's office. If they may, especially in New York. I have a load of renters that share my space. So we don't have enough wall space for everyone. But you can easily look up whether they have graduated from a master's degree program. And then there is our board. We have a national board called the NCCAOM, and you'll have practitioners listed there. If you're an older practitioner such as myself, you may not have some of the newer board certifications that exist. They should at least have the board certification in acupuncture. Since I've been working, they've come out with like 3 or 4 more. I can't keep up with them at all, and I'm just not going to sit down and take another exam. It's just, I'm very busy, so I don't really care to take it. But the newer practitioners are also I think the newer is called the board certification in Oriental medicine. So it encompasses herbs and maybe Tuina and a few other things.
Okay. Great. I want to go back to something you talked about a little while ago about the yin and the yang. And so if I understand that correctly, it's about being in balance. Is that correct?
Yes, you're absolutely correct. So what we ascertain after we have spoken to a patient and analyzed constitution and skin color and all of this stuff is what the pattern of energetic disharmony is, and then we treat the pattern. And as we treat, as I said before, that pattern will shift and change, and then our treatment shifts and changes along with that.
Okay, and so what happens when we're out of balance? If the yin and the yang aren't necessarily working in the right way with the right energy level?
Oh, all kinds of things can happen. Pretty much anything that feels wonky or off for you. So it could be as simple as chronic fatigue. It could be headaches, regular headaches, migraines. I have a lot of patients who come to me because they're constantly getting colds and flus, whereas their partner or coworkers aren't getting them as often as they are. So their chi isn't strong enough to protect them from these external pathogens. Perhaps, even allergies, seasonal allergies, food sensitivities, digestive disorders, which are numerous, and all kinds of pain. People develop different types of pain. So that's very wide in scope, the word. I'm using a very broad generalization there. What else?
So then is it safe to say that when you're out of balance, that really creates sort of the environment for things to happen to you? So it can affect your immune system. It can manifest in a lot of different ways, maybe even eventually develop into some type of disease. Is that generally what the potential is for the things that happen to us?
You stated it perfectly. Yes, absolutely. That's exactly it.
Okay. Well, great. So maybe I should look into Chinese medicine as a second profession or something close to that. But,
sure.
So tell us, I'm really curious about how you actually ended up doing what you do. What inspired you to become a practitioner of Chinese medicine?
So my journey is really interesting. It started as a young woman. When I was about 19 years old or so, maybe it was about 21, I graduated from massage school, and I began to work full-time at a really busy spa. And my massage clients would regularly ask me about natural healing methods like whole foods nutrition, vitamins, minerals, herbs, chiropractic or osteopathic medicine, and Ayurveda, Chinese medicine, acupuncture. And it wasn't within my scope of practice as a massage therapist to answer these questions with any authority. So I decided that I should study these things in depth. And a lot of these patients also had tried numerous industrialized medicine techniques. And they either didn't help or they made them worse. And so many people try to avoid taking pharmaceutical meds, or they want to reduce taking their pharmaceutical drugs. So these conversations reflected their openness toward and trust in natural healing methods. At first I thought I'd go to medical school and study natural medicine so that I could open a natural medicine practice. However, I realized that medical training and I would not get along. I'd argue those methods, and I'd likely fail right out of school because I'd refuse to be indoctrinated to believe that the highest standards of care were surgery or drugs, right? I grew up with parents who grew food in their backyard, and I took vitamin supplements as a young person, and we ate healthfully. My parents were very aware, so I already sort of I grew up with this awareness. Meanwhile, I was being treated with traditional Chinese medicine and acupuncture for debilitating menstrual cramps. Absolutely debilitating. I would be just rolled up in a ball for days with a hot pack. And, you know, what were we taking at that time? I think Midol was the thing to take, and then eventually became naproxen sodium, which was, at that point, pharmaceutical. Now it's over the counter. And that's what I would do. And then my doctor said, okay, Juliette, we're going to put you on the pill for your cramps. And I stayed on the pill for a very long time. And what ended up happening was that one pill wouldn't work anymore. I'd get cramps again, or I'd have breakthrough bleeding. And over time, I just decided that, you know, this isn't what I wanted to do anymore. I did not want to be medicated. I also started, as I was into my 20s, to recognize that the pill was in some way covering up or suppressing my intuition. And I didn't like that. So I decided that I would just cease the pill. And I went to a practitioner of Chinese medicine and I said, listen, I need to know if you can help me, because I'm so debilitated, I cannot miss work. So you can't lie to me. I need your honest to God truth, whether you can help me with this or not. And they said, yes, we can help you. We're going to give you Chinese herbs. Within 4 to 6 months, I had no cramps. No cramps anymore. And that was it. I was sold. I knew that this was the medicine for me to pursue. I knew that this would help me to help scores of other women with all kinds of female disorders, you know. So my specialty now has become female pelvic disorders, and I have subspecialties, dermatology, and I do see male patients, so I see them for dermatology and allergies and some other, like, headaches and stress anxiety. So those are the other things that I see a lot of.
Right. So I'm sure that women who have had problems with fibroid tumors would be happy to know that there's an alternative solution aside from having surgery, although some of the procedures have gotten better and less invasive, but if they can avoid that altogether and shrink or eliminate their fibroid tumors through the practice of herbs and Chinese medicine, I'm sure that's a real value to them.
It's huge, and I love working with my fibroid patients because there really seems to be no other choice for them. And so if patients come to me early in the game, like as soon as they're diagnosed, I can help them much further. However, if they come to me later in the game and surgery is necessary, which sometimes it is, what I can do is work with my patients up to surgery, help them to build strength to get through it and recover from it, and then we must prevent regrowth. And one of the things that irks me the most about a lot of these surgeons is that they do not inform their patients that the fibroids will grow back. And what I can do, if the fibroids are quite large, and some women have very large fibroids that do need to be removed surgically, we can then prevent regrowth. Or if it grows, keep it really small. And if I can get these women through menopause, usually after menopause, and that our estrogen hormones are no longer surging and feeding the tumors, the fibroids, usually at that point they don't need to work with me anymore. So we do. So what I do is treatment, prevention, and maybe mitigation, or just kind of like, let's get you through to menopause.
Okay, that is a great segue to my last question. We're going to wrap up soon, but can you just summarize like how Chinese medicine and the use of herbs can actually be effective in preventing, curing, or managing diseases?
So traditional Chinese medicine has a whole system for prevention, and it's incredible. We want our patients to eat well and balanced. In different seasons, we will recommend different types of food. So, for example, in the wintertime, we advise that our patients avoid raw foods. no juicing, no, unless, if you live in a very, very hot climate, it might be okay. But I'm in New York City. If you live in a northern climate, it's probably not the best thing because there's already cold. There's external cold that's invading our body. And if we continue to eat cold, raw foods, it can hamper the spleen cheese energy in such a significant way that it can really reduce your ability to fight off colds and flus, and it can also lead to some other more intense internal disorders. And exercise, stretching. These are a large part of it because it helps to move the qi. So we make the qi by eating and drinking. We're born with a certain amount of qi, obviously, but we have to keep feeding it. And then we want to circulate the qi. So that could be walking. It just all depends on what you're able to do with what you have and where you are. You just start where you are. And, for young people, for, little kids and stuff like that, they have so much energy. We probably want them to run a lot of it off, especially because we as parents would like to sleep. So hopefully they'll fall asleep. So for them, it may be, they need a lot more running around than perhaps we do. But now, since most of us are working sedentary jobs, we do need to keep things moving. I encourage my patients to set a timer on their desktop or their cell phones so that they get up from their desk and walk around. I'm just like, make an excuse. Tell them you have to go to the bathroom or you need a drink of water or whatever it is. Go to the water cooler, walk around a little bit. And making sure that we get enough sleep. That's a huge step for prevention. Some people need more sleep than others, and sometimes too much sleep can also cause a detriment to the qi. It can actually suck your qi. I think some people have experienced this. If they've slept too long, they'll wake up and not feel great. But perhaps if they only slept 7 or 8 hours, they would wake up feeling so much more rested. So again, finding that balance for each person. I recommend usually at least 7 hours of sleep for most people.
Okay, and just very quickly, what happens when we actually do not get enough sleep? What could potentially happen to us, and how does that play a role in us getting sick or even getting some sort of disease, if possible?
From the traditional Chinese standpoint, it can be very qi draining. We need that slumber to restore our energy. Right? So we're restoring and re-energizing, which is exactly what you're talking about all of the time. So it's really taking time to have that yin. So when we're out and we're doing all this stuff, it's yang energy stuff, right? So we balance that with our yin, quiet sleep time. And that helps us to keep our energy, the yin and yang energies balanced.
Okay, and sometimes when we don't get enough sleep, if that happens, I guess, consistently, that can also affect the immune system. Is that true?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's because it's draining our qi, and there's a lot of excellent modern scientific studies that are showing other reasons for that, such as increase in cortisol, which is the stress hormone, and a decrease in the healthy hormones like endorphins and enkephalins. We also know that when these things happen and we're not getting enough rest, we may have more of a tendency to gain weight or a harder time losing weight. So there's that aspect of it, and it has and people who don't sleep enough have shorter lives, and this is some new science that we're finding out, and it's good science. I don't like to talk when I talk about science. I don't like to talk about poorly designed scientific studies. I'm really particular about when I read things. I want to know who paid for it, who's publishing it, what are the interests. But there's some good science, sleep science that's coming out. But I encourage your audience to look into that if they're having some trouble. But Chinese medicine can help with that.
Okay, great. So this has been really great information. Thank you so much for being part of the show. And I'd like to have you back at some point in the future because I know you have a lot of information to share. And we've just really scratched the surface with what we've talked about today. So I thank you again very much. And just if someone's interested in getting connected to you, how can they go about doing that?
Sure, they can call me at 212-894-0767, or you can contact me through my website, which is healthystuffu, it's the letter u.com, healthystuffu.com. And there's a contact me form right on there, so you can just shoot me an email through the contact me form, and I'm happy to talk with you. And thank you, Rhonda, so much for having me. It's been wonderful, and I'm so glad that you're doing this for your audience. It's amazing.
Well, thank you, Juliette. So this is Rhonda Smith signing off for the Recover, Restore, Re-Energize Your Life show, the show that helps you understand how to live a more vibrant and healthy life from the inside out. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.